Everyone, would you buy a used car from that man? I don't think so. I'd like to start with something that's a little prayerful, and being from the Society of the Divine Word, and I'd like to, as I say that, I'd like to give my apologies for my confreres who are not here with us today. The Society of the Divine Word this year is 150 years old, and all of the SVDs, Societas Verbum Divinum, so all of us SVDs except for me, have gone to Melbourne to a gathering there, which is, it's a party. So it's celebrating the 150 years. So my confreres work with a number of you in various communities across this country, and so the apologies. But I'll start with something prayerful and something that is quite international, and I guess that's where I'm coming from as a missionary.
If I'm being dishonest with you, I'm always at home. I'm never at the bar, drinking on my own. I don't need
It's really nice music, but it's not quite the music that goes with this. Okay.
I do not know your ways, your customs, your creed, the things you believe. I never learned your skin's a different color, your God has a different name. It's easy to see how someone could believe that you and I, we're not the same. But then I saw you smiling as the sun rose in the sky, and I saw the tears you wept as you watched your loved one die. And when I heard your children singing, they sounded much like mine. Somehow I knew we weren't that different after all. There is a language of the heart that we all can understand, that reaches across the boundaries of all peoples and all lands. The deepest things we know by heart when all is said and done. It's a language of the heart, can make us friends, can make us one. I dream of peace and harmony. I imagine days to come when war disappears and friendship draws near to bind up age-old wounds. I've heard that love changes everything. I believe that it's true, don't you? If I reach out my hand, will you take it? Then let's stand for all that's right and just and true. Because I saw you smiling as the sun rose in the sky, and I saw the tears you wept as you watched your loved one die. And when I heard your children singing, they sounded just like mine. And then I knew we weren't that different after all. There is a language of the heart that we all can understand, that reaches across the boundaries of all peoples and all lands. The deepest things we know by heart when all is said and done. as friends can make us one.
So that was put together by one of my confrères, one of my brothers, as a Japanese priest, from some of the work we were doing together, various groups of us. This is going back a few years. But as I said, as a missionary, I tend to come from the macro, the world level, and then move it down into the micro level. So sent out as pilgrims of hope, and I always put on mission, because I'm a missionary, so I've added that extra little bit there. Here's a quote that I often like to use. This is from Pope Paul VI, back from Evangelii Nuntiandi, so it really comes from Second Vatican Council. Christ first of all proclaims a kingdom, the kingdom of God. This is so important that by comparison, everything else becomes the rest, which is given in addition. Only the kingdom, therefore, is absolute, and it makes everything else relative. So we may say kingdom, we may say reign of God, but we are kingdom people as Christians. And we talk about the kingdom that is to come after we go to God, but we also talk about the kingdom that's here now, that we together are trying to manifest on earth. So it's got those two parts. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about mission, reimagining mission. It's not our mission. It's God's mission. And so we might think a little bit differently about being pilgrims on hope on mission, so we can truly think about this Missio Dei, or this mission of God, with some level of integrity and authenticity. And another colleague of mine, an SVD priest, Tony Pernia, would talk about these four areas, and I'm going to talk about them briefly with you, Activism to contemplation, moving from individualism to collaboration, moving from superiority to humility, and moving from only evangelizing to also being evangelized. So the first one, from activism to contemplation. So all of us, having gone through our Christian training, either as small children or as adults, there were certain things that we needed to do and certain things that we needed not to do. So you remember back, we should be kind, we should be holy, we should be thoughtful, we should be prayerful and charitable. We should not lie, we should not hurt others, we should not steal, and we should not speak ill of others. And there's quite a few of us that are reasonable at the good works, but perhaps not so good at the prayer. And so going back to a very long tradition in the church, ora et labora, some more Latin there, which is prayer and good works. And hopefully that's us as Christian people, trying to get that balance right. And it highlights again that we do need to do work, both individually and together, on our relationship with God, our relationship with Jesus, our relationship with the Spirit, or as we see there, even our relationship with Mary. I love that term. Because of her, we can. So for each of these, I'll give a little story, and they'll be short stories because we don't have that much time. But I was visiting some of my confrères in Spain. I had a job there to visit all the communities in Spain on behalf of our Superior General. And I was there in a fairly large city with a very multicultural community of my brothers, my confrères. And the newest one, the provincial said to him, you take Father Tim, downtown and show him the beauty and the treasures of our city. And so this confrère, he'd only been in Spain for 7 months. And this guy was Vietnamese, trying to learn Spanish. But he did what the provincial asked, and he took me out on the bus and he showed me all the beautiful architecture and the beautiful churches in this city. After a little while, he said, would you like to come and meet some amigos, some friends of mine? I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And so he took me down these stairs, down by the river, which divided the town. And as we got down there, all these people came towards us. They were homeless people, they were immigrants, they were poor people. And they all came up to chat with Padre Chino, so the Chinese priest. Now, I know he was Vietnamese. And I said to him, does it matter? And he said, nah, it doesn't matter to me. They call me Padre Chino, so I'm Padre Chino, fine. And one showed him a fish that he just caught. Another came up wearing a shirt and said, this is the shirt you gave me. So we were talking in Spanish. Remember when you gave me this shirt? And others just came up to chat with him. So we were there for about half an hour with, 10 or 12 people. And then we left. And I thought, this guy had just been tasked with showing me the treasures of the city. And like St. Lawrence, the deacon, in our history of the church, he actually showed me the treasures, he showed me the buildings, showed me the beautiful churches, but then he showed me the real treasures. He didn't know he was doing this, but he showed me the real treasures of that city, the poor people. And so that movement, we'd come from before we came out on this trip, he said, can you celebrate Mass with me? We're going to do benediction and we're going to do Divine Mercy, all of those rather holy things, which I did with him happily. And then we did this. So it highlights for me the importance of the prayer and the good works, the ora et labora. Both of them are really important aspects of our lives, and we need to work on both. So we called him Juan, Padre Chino. We called a Vietnamese guy in Spain Juan, but anyhow, this beautiful thing that happens with his prayer and his good works, it moves from one to the other and back to the first and back to the second. So I was so delighted as he showed me the treasures of this city. So he's a pilgrim. There he is in Spain trying to learn Spanish and work in quite a multicultural city, bringing hope to those people around him. So the second one, from individualism to collaboration. So we Christians sometimes think that we are the primary agents of Christianity in the world. We're the ones who are going to teach people all about Jesus. Yet, it's not about me and it's not about you. It's about us. And we need to consider, who are we collaborating with? Who are we on mission with? And we're not always that good at collaborating with people who are different to us, people who are different in age, gender, ethnicity, various backgrounds. Maybe they're not as smart as I am. Maybe they're not as knowledgeable as I am, so it's hard for me to work with them. But it's really important. We need to be forming teams and working on those teams. And the membership of those teams is inevitably going to change. How do we allow it to change? Do we control the change? Or do we allow all sorts of different people to come on the team? But acknowledging that we can't do it alone sometimes does make us feel kind of vulnerable. So the story on this one, I was a physiotherapist as a seminarian working in Pentridge Prison. I got one session a week in my final year and a half of theology. And so I'd catch the train and the bus across the city in Melbourne, and I'd do a session there with various people in the prison. One day, 2 prison officers asked me to accompany them to solitary confinement to treat someone there. And as we walked, and the Pentridge was historically, and I think it's quite infamous, one of the worst prisons in Australia. Big blue stone, huge metal doors. So when the doors clanged shut behind you, you knew you were inside the prison and you were never going to get out unless they unlocked those doors. So as they went towards solitary confinement, and one of them looked at me and said, "Make sure you hurt him." Now, as a physiotherapist, I know that sometimes we cause just a little bit of pain sometimes, but I would never intentionally do that. So I've gone into the cell, and there was this really large, obese man with really strong odour, body odour, and he was only in his early 20s. And I asked him what was wrong, and he said, well, he'd been beaten up by some prisoners, and so he had some issues with his neck and his shoulder. So I helped him take off his shirt, lay on the treatment table, and a treatment table has a hole in it so you can actually breathe while you're being treated. So I'm working on his back and his shoulder. And as often happens with physiotherapists and nurses and doctors, when you actually start to touch people, they begin to tell you parts of their lives. And he began to tell me parts of his life, which was a tragic life, an awful life. He'd been physically and sexually abused as a child, and sadly, he'd gone on to abuse children himself. That's why he was in prison. So I'm treating him, and I'm thinking, I'm starting to feel awkward about the treatment. I'm treating someone, I'm healing someone who has hurt children. Anyway, I completed the treatment, and I was due to come back the following week. And I went home on the bus, and this was going round and round in my head that, should I be treating someone, should I be healing someone who has hurt children? Got back to the seminary. The following day was one of my classes in theology, and with probably one of our scariest teachers, scariest lecturers. But this, I hadn't had any sleep overnight. This was going round and round in my head. And so he started the lecture, and I timidly put up my hand, and he said, "Norton, what do you want?" And I said, "Look, there's something that's really concerning me," and I was able to state it in a tremulous voice. And he said, "Right, all of you, pens down, books down." We used to use pens and books back in those days. We're talking about this today. And so for 2 hours, he facilitated a conversation in the classroom about this. And there were people who had the opinion I should not be treating this man, others who thought I should. So it was a very robust discussion. And at the end he said, "Well, Norton, what are you going to do?" And I said, well, I'm going back. I'm going to treat this man, because it's become very clear to me, and I really appreciate all this discussion today. It's really clear to me, my job is to heal him, not to judge him, but to heal him. I have no other task but to heal him. And I did go back, and we continued the treatments. So it wasn't nice not knowing what to do initially. I thought I should be able to do this on my own, but I couldn't. Yet that conversation with others, I did have to have a bit of courage to get into the classroom and then have that conversation, helped me know how to be faithful, helped me know to be on the pilgrim journey and a person of hope, helped me how to know to be in mission. So that was my mission context there, and I've had a few. So what are your mission contexts? Where are you on mission? How are you on mission? And what are your questions on mission as pilgrims of hope? So as pilgrims, we're normally in it together. We're not alone, but we must make efforts to be doing it with others. And inevitably, not just people who are the same as us, but people who are different to us. We can use words, we can use gestures, we can use silence, we may even use healing touch from time to time. So the third area there was from superiority to humility. The gospel message is enduring across time, across place, across people. It is not the possession of any one person or any one group. And so again, going back to us being on mission together, being on pilgrimage together, pilgrims of hope together, but we are all in context, and context is important. So being on mission is actually a gift. So we don't own the gospel, we are but servants or stewards of the gospel and the gospel message. So I love including some of the artwork from where I presently am on mission and a pilgrim of hope, which is the Kimberley. These two people, Chris and Gabby, made their way to the town of Warman, and they had been teachers there. And the two of them are cyclists, and they decided to run a cycling workshop just for a week. And the joy that that caused in that town. And I love this image because here we have an elder sharing with a younger person, not the wisdom of the ages, but how to fix your bloody bike. And Chris will say, Chris is a cyclist, the tall man there, and he says, the first time I got a bicycle on my own and could fly down the road with the wind blowing through my hair, well, I've forgotten what that's like, but he said, the wind throwing through my hair, he said, I'll never forget, and I want kids to have that experience. And what a great week it was. We got some wonderful images out of that and stories out of that. but I digress there. So this idea of moving from superiority to humility involves risk. It involves stepping out of what might be our comfort zones or our normal routine. And it can cause us at times to stop and say, what is life all about? I might have some good things in my life, but there's other people around me who don't have those good things and those good relationships. So maybe I need to do something about that on the Christian journey. And maybe I need to leave a little bit of myself to one side as I renew myself. So we are Christians constantly looking for conversion on this pilgrim way, and we do it together. So there I was in Brisbane with my previous mob. They're still my mob. I sat at dinner with them last night, people from Brisbane. And I had a little to do with Emmanuel City Mission, which is a day refuge for people who are struggling. And the guy who runs it is Robbie. So Robbie, he's the instigator of all of this. He's on the left in the blue vest there, Robbie Curtis. And Robbie is not a First Nations person, but has forged wonderful relationships and friendships with First Nations people. A lot of the people who are on the street there in Brisbane are from the town of Cherbourg, biggest Aboriginal community in the state. So he thought it'd be a good idea for us to go on pilgrimage to Cherbourg. And so 3 years ago we did. We walked 300 kilometres in 7 days. And then we did it again last year. And they've done it again this year. So both fundraising and awareness raising. And I was very happy to walk along with them. One of the guys who walked on that was a guy called Tim. And Tim was sharing his story with me and says I can share it with others. Tim came out of the corporate world. High finance, he's a lawyer. And his family life was kind of imploding and he was really struggling to find meaning. But he knew he needed to leave the corporate life. He did that. And a friend of his said, well, Emmanuel City Mission are looking for an operating officer. And he said to his friend, I'm a lawyer. I'm not an operating officer for a refuge for street people. But lo and behold, his friend put in the CV, he got the job. He's now the operating officer. And Tim said, I'd never had much to do with people who lived on the street. He said, so there I was, moving into this new circle of what I'll now call friends. And he said, the love, apart from sometimes violence, but the love that I felt in that space has made me a new person, has made me a better father, has made me a much better Christian. And he said, it is just ironic that I come from this place where I thought I had it all, but I didn't. And he said, I'm finding I actually have it all now in this place, surrounded by these people. And in that place, school teachers will take school kids as well. And I'm really interested in this as mission. So some teachers and some parents, despite all the risks associated in going to a place like this, are making some calculated risk decisions and saying this is going to be good for the kids. And indeed, so kids 16, 17 do go to Emmanuel City Mission. And they actually say in their debrief that they're sharing with people that they normally wouldn't even speak to if they saw them on the street. And one kid has made quite a famous, he's a year 11 guy, said, if God exists, he's right here in this place with these people. Now, you can't get a better evangelisation of year 11 boys than that. It's one of the best. So here he is, reconnecting as a belief in God through these people. And some of the students go off and bring their parents in to volunteer too, because their sceptical parents need a dose of this as well sometimes, to see the face of Christ in this place, in these people. And the last one is from only evangelising to being evangelised. Whatever our first culture is, it pervades our bones, our heart and our soul, but it does not define our destiny, for none of us. It's a highly important part of who we are. But our life experiences, what happens to us on the journey, will change us, and we can actually deepen our understanding of the gospel, of Jesus in this world around us, and can help us change and be better pilgrims on the journey, pilgrims of hope. So mostly it's easier for us to work and communicate in mission using our First Nations context or our first cultural context. that can be helpful sometimes, but other times it can just get in the bloody way because it's not appropriate for the context in which we find ourselves. And so all of us are called to hold our first culture close and dear. But it's not everything, because it's not the first culture of those other people over there or these ones over here. And so we have to have some level of ability to adapt. And so there's some tensions in that. But if we're moving into new spaces, and I've done a lot of this over the years, you need to give the local people the way to say, well, the Spirit's sitting in you, what do we need to do? What's next? And probably one of the best examples of that I know, first off, I'll talk about chapter John 15. When Jesus said, a new commandment, love one another as I have loved you, Jesus was not saying you should love God more. Jesus was not saying you should love me more. Jesus was saying you should love others more, just like I've loved you, and you need to love yourself. That's the new commandment of Christianity. And so our attempts, lousy as they are, to love all people all of the time are what actually pleases God. Yes, we can be regular mass goers, we can say lots of rosaries, all of those things are really important. But on their own, they don't cut it. We've got to do the loving, hard and all as that is, as the other branch of this tree. Both go together. But this idea from only evangelising to be evangelised, one of the best examples of that is me. So, more recently, we did a pilgrimage. So, spinning off those pilgrimages that I did in Brisbane, there were people outside Derby who've been in what was a leprosarium there and only closed in 1986. Lost a bit of... we're back. A place called Bungarun. So I visited that place in February. I only started in the Kimberley in December. And I said to the parish priest there, this is a very holy place. This is the cemetery. 375 graves there. Almost all of people who lived and died with leprosy in that place, except for a few who are graves of some St John of God sisters who actually worked in that place. And for some of those people, they'll tell me that sisters were the only people that actually hugged them. They had leprosy. So the levels of touch were really minimal. So here we were going to Bungarun, and some of us decided, well, how about we walk there? So we went from the cemetery in Derby to the cemetery in Bungarun. 14 Ks, and they said the marsh road is the best way to get there. And I said, well, I just want to see the tide patterns because I don't want it to be high tide when we're walking across that marsh road. And it wasn't. So this is just a few of us. There's probably twice as many of that. We expected 4 or 5 to come with us, and we're going back, go forward. So that was just a few of us. And this little guy did the whole thing in bare feet. Of course he did. Because he can. So there we are, walking across the marsh road. We get to the edge of the marsh, which is very close to the Bungarun and the cemetery, and we arrive here. And who's waiting for us? Mary. So we had a new statue of Mary. So there are a few people were there with us, and just a little further on, we expected maybe 100 people might come from around the Kimberley because so many have had relatives in that place through the years. So it's a really important place. So about 100 people waiting for us there. So the few of us who were walking were saying, wow, look at this. And as we walked, we got to the Mass, there's another 100 waiting there. So there were well over 200, towards 250 people all up, which was more than double what we'd even imagined. So capturing people's imagination, because what we were doing, we were honouring these people. Not just those people, we were honouring these people, who were all people who lived in Bungarun with leprosy. Subsequently, after the Mass, we went out with holy water, blessed all those graves, went back to the little Catholic school in town in Derby, and the teachers, wonderful teachers that they are, teachers are wonderful, worked so hard in just providing service and food for everyone. We had lunch, and then we listened to testimony from these and others, people who lived in that place and what it meant for them. bittersweet, some very, very challenging things said that day. So this, I think, was truth-telling. And this is me sitting in all this, been there since December, and feeling so touched, so deeply touched, so deeply humbled around these people, so deeply touched by the Spirit, this whole experience. So pilgrims of hope. And the ones given the most hope were these ones. One of them, who was diagnosed with leprosy at 15, was taken from a family and put in Bungarun, and she could only see her parents through a wire fence, so couldn't actually touch them anymore. And she spoke of that and how much that affected her in her life. So don't think leprosy was around before colonisation. Another gift given from people from other countries to the First Nations people of Australia. So some very sad stories, but some strong stories in there. Some stories of resilience, strength, courage and conversion. So who's being evangelised? Well, it's that bloke who thinks he's really hot. They're standing beside a car. So a great gift from Brisbane Archdiocese as I was leaving there, and I was asked to go to Broome. Certainly there was some sadness for me leaving, some sadness of people going to miss me. But they, as an archdiocese, gave the Broome Diocese this car. And so I was sitting with Bishop Ken Howell from Toowoomba, and so he'd also been an auxiliary bishop in Brisbane with me, and he'd previously been sent to Toowoomba. He's the Bishop of Toowoomba. And just before I left, he came in to see me, and we're sitting having coffee. He said, "Are they giving you a car?" And I said, "I don't know, mate. I don't know. Someone said something, but here am I playing dumb. I don't know." And he said, "They gave me a cross." I said, "It was a really nice cross." So I guess because I'm a bit more practical in many ways, this was the gift given to me, and it's been a great gift. So it's enabled me, Naomi, Pastoral Projects Officer there, to travel really across this vast diocese that we have and meet these wonderful, wonderful people that Bishop Michael met before me in the 3 years that he spent there as the administrator. A very healing balm he was during that time. But every time this happens to me, it is just so moving for me. I'm not a black fella, I know that, but I'm treated with such respect, with such love, and it means so much. And it's happened quite a few times now. And like going to school, the school in Balgo, where the teacher had thought that all the kids should make a mitre or a pointy hat like the bishops were. And I think this is hilarious. This is fantastic. So we're all sitting on the floor and we're trying to talk about where the pointy hats come from. I mean, I'll give you the tip. I don't wear my pointy hat much in the diocese. It's too bloody hot, really. I thought Brisbane was hot. Not a chance. No. Much hotter in the Kimberley. And what do? We do things like this. We sit around, and as the synodal process that was described before, we involve ourselves in synodal processes, commonly called yarning. And here we have the commissioning of the Aboriginal Diocesan Council. And so not all of them are there, but most of them are here. This is the group that's come to NATSICC from the Broome Diocese. And we do formation when we can. It's very hard for us to get together in person. We do some stuff online, but when we do get together, we value it. We try really hard to do things that are meaningful, and we try really hard to listen to one another. So probably the best example of moving from evangelising to being evangelised and having, again, it's that one thing and the other. It's not one or the other, it's both and they move between. So I've got a job to evangelise, certainly, but I need to be evangelised in the process. And I think this is good mission for all of us, that we are people, pilgrims, hopeful people, but people on mission, all of us together, capable of listening to one another, listening to one another's truths, and acting and saying our truth as well. But we need to be doing both. So as baptised people, here we are. One of our obligations, it's not just an add-on, we're obliged to be witnessing to the light of Christ in the world, to both being Christ and to finding Christ around us. And we look for signs of this reign or this kingdom of God in our daily lives, present in our world, and we do our best to try and bring these signs respectfully to one another. And this shows in the ways that we just do things with one another, the ways that we talk, the ways that we're in silence, the ways that we collaborate, the ways that we sing, the ways that we share. And so our context will always give us clues to do this, because the Spirit can only work with us through a culture. Wherever we are in the world and whoever we're with, that's the place the Spirit is choosing to work with us. And context is important. The Spirit knows this, and that's the way the Spirit will work with us. That's an image of the beginning of the wet season. So one of the creeks, which is now flowing out into the sea. Taken that pindan, that red dust, which is now not just between my toes, it's been all over me. I've been under the car changing the tyre on the Tanami. This is one of our most remote communities, Columbaroo. So we aim, all of us, to be active, contemplative in this world. People in the ora et labora. People who work on our relationship with God, Jesus and the Spirit, and are sent out on mission as pilgrims of hope. And so we do this not as the ones who have the seeds of the light of Christ. No, the seeds of the light of Christ are all around us. We have them too, but we discover them together in context with the people with whom we are in ministry. We don't own the gospel. We are servants or stewards of that gospel. And so we together are pilgrims of hope on the mission of bringing about the fullness of the kingdom now and the kingdom to come. Thank you.